I'm Jana.
And I'm Carol.
And this is the Real Talk Recreation Therapy Podcast.
On this podcast, we talk about real experiences and real research that back up the use of recreation therapy as a method of treatment for a variety of populations.
We try to keep it real as we address concerns and successes that we and other recreation therapists have had as we all navigate this awesome career field.
We don't have it all figured out, but one thing we know for sure is everything gets a lot easier when you can talk it out with a friend. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Real Talk Recreation Therapy Podcast. Today, we are doing an interview with somebody that I had the pleasure of working with when I was working at the Soldier Recovery Unit. Her name is Adriene Wilson, and she is a coach for Team Army. So I got to know Adriene over the course of 2 weeks, where I went to JBLM in Washington, and then she came out to Hawaii to put on an adaptive sports camp for some of the soldiers in the Soldier Recovery Unit, and she was super fun to work with, and we're really excited to learn about her experiences on this topic. So a little bit about Adriene. She is from Columbia, South Carolina. She's a personal trainer and coach at Athletes Arena in Irmo, South Carolina. She's a Team Army Warrior Games coach for Field and Powerlifting and Team USA Invictus Coach for Field and Powerlifting. She was the Team USA Paralympic coach for the 2019 Pan America Games in Lima, Peru, and an NCAA D2 13-time All-American, Ashland University, 3-time U.S. Olympic trials competitor. So thanks for joining us today, Adriene. We're so glad to have you here.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really excited to speak to your crowd, and I am so grateful for all the work you do.
Oh, thank you. All right. So just to get started, can you just tell us a little bit more about yourself? I know we just read that bio, but tell us what you do.
Well, my background's always been in sport. I played softball, I golfed when I was younger, and then I got into middle school and high school, and it turned out track and field was my jam. I did not like to run, so they said, you're going to go throw. And I found out that it was so much fun. I learned the shotgun discus in 7th grade and threw all the way through high school, and actually got a scholarship to throw in college. Once I got to college, I landed the most amazing coach and team atmosphere to just transform my life and put me in a direction of a sport for the rest of my life. My coach was a 4-time Olympian. His name is Judd Logan. And if you ever wanted to be inspired, you just got to look that man up. He passed away almost a year ago. So it's a sad loss for him, but he has shaped me as the coach I am, and definitely as the athlete. But my life transformed when I learned how to train properly and use sport as my outlet of, for purpose and performance. And I want to pass that on to anybody else who wants to just find a new level of themselves and a new layer, perhaps, So I did compete at 3 U.S. Olympic trials, and the shot put was my primary event. My best finish was 5th, so I was pretty close to making that top 3 to go to Athens. But unfortunately, the 5th spot was mine. So I continued training for 2 more Olympic trials until I decided just to actually switch gears and become a coach primarily, but also I compete in the Scottish Highland Games. So I still get to throw stuff. I travel around the world. I throw rocks and I flip trees, but I wear my kilt while I do it. So it's super fun. And I still get to be really competitive. And I meet a lot of really cool people that way too. But my full-time job is a personal trainer and a coach at Athletes Arena in South Carolina. And I work with a lot of just general population people. It's called Athletes Arena, but we have all sorts of people who train there. And I tend to get the difficult cases. So I do have people with medical disabilities, MS. I have someone with Down syndrome. I have another guy who had traumatic brain injury from a car accident. So I don't have your traditional general population people. I have people who need that physical activity to survive. And that's how I look at my job, is I'm helping someone survive to be physical and active.
Wow, Adriene, that's so inspirational. I'm so excited for this episode to learn from you. And I can already tell, I imagine if I was one of your athletes, I would just be so pumped to work with you, just hearing.
We get to have a lot of fun, I'll tell you that.
Your passion just totally comes through. It's really fun. So, okay, so you knew an Olympic coach, and
I got to train under him. And actually, his last Olympic Games, he made the Sydney Games in 2000 as a 41-year-old person. And he was the oldest member of the team. But as a freshman in college, to watch your coach train at that level, it really kind of sets the tone for how you need to kind of step it up. And I was so naive at that point. So I was very, very young in the training aspect. So it was really, really fortunate that I got to experience that at that level for sure.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, and so inspiring. And so how did you get in with Team Army and the Paralympics? Was it just like you're around these people so you know who to go to? How did you
Actually, I was very fortunate. I'd not had any experience with adapted sports. My undergrad was PE and health. So the closest I had was just one class, adapted sport. Everything else was pretty much just focused on able body. And so a friend of mine had been involved with the Warrior Games, and he and his father had both been coaches over the years, and said, Adriane, would you ever be interested in doing this? I'm like, absolutely. I have no idea what it is, but I would love to help. And so fast forward, I think it's about 2 years later, they actually gave me a shout and said, hey, would you be interested in coaching for Team Army? And there's this camp coming up. I'm like, I can't make those. I have other commitments, but I can make this thing here at the end. It says Warrior Games, whatever that is. And that's basically the big show, right? So I was brought in for the big show at Warrior Games 2016 at West Point, and it was an incredible experience. I was super fortunate that the head coach at the time, his name is Brad Fishhorn, he took me under his wing and showed me the ropes. I am so grateful for his knowledge and just showing me how things work, because I was used to just standing throwers. Here's this, and this. Then you can't do that with some athletes. They have prosthetics. They have injuries. They have to sit throwing in a chair. So that was very eye-opening for me, but it just lit a fire in me. Like, I love this. I love what I get to learn, and I can still implement all the knowledge that I've had as an athlete and coach to someone who's still brand new and maybe just learning the sport. But it was very fun to just dive into just another realm of sport.
With your background in throwing, you were prepared to train people too, even if it was a different type of sport. So what do you enjoy the most about coaching adaptive athletes?
It's the ability to maybe just shine a light on something that they never knew they could achieve. That maybe they had a recent car accident where their life has completely been flipped upside down. Nothing is the same. Everything has to be modified, and it's frustrating. It's disappointing. It's scary. And so for you to say, you can still throw the shot put, you can still play basketball, you can still do things just in a different way. And when they kind of get that, or else at least allow the opportunity to try, it feels so great to know that the sport can still be in their life, and they can achieve something instead of just being, sad. I mean, it's sad, but it can be so much more. There's so much more happiness to be had.
Yeah. It can be really empowering to realize, oh, sure, maybe you can't do everything that you used to do in the same way, but there are still so many things that you can still do and like go on to do at a competitive level for some people too. So can you tell us a little bit more about the sports that you coach?
Put me anywhere, I'll try and coach it.
For the adaptive sports, can you explain to us what they are, the ones that you specifically?
Well, I initially was brought in for the field events. So in track and field, you have the track events where, of course, you're running around the track. And then there's the field events. So there's the shot put, it's basically a cannonball. You have a little cannonball you're going to be throwing, and then the discus throw. People say like throw the frisbee, but those are the two main throwing events that you'll see in the Warrior Games and Invictus Games. But at the Paralympic level or Olympic level, there's also the hammer throw, the weight throw, javelin. So there's other throwing events, but primarily we focus on the shot put, discus, and javelin.
What would be like the adaptive aspects of it?
There's the standing. You could be a standing athlete where it looks like you're able-bodied throwing, or you're throwing in a circle. You might have a toe board for the shot put or a runway for the javelin. But then there's also the seated throwing. This is for athletes who may not be able to stand, or they have some type of disability or injury that's prohibiting them from moving as an upright thrower. So the seated throw is actually really cool. There is a throwing frame. If you can imagine, just like a big bar stool. That there's some regulations as far as size and height and what you can do with it to make sure that the athlete is safe. But athlete will sit on this chair. They are strapped in with lots of Velcro straps and little ratchet things to make sure they're secure on the chair. But this chair is also going to be fixed down on a platform or else staked into the ground to make sure that it's not going to move. So the athlete essentially can be stationary, and they're still going to perform the event with the shot put or the discus, the javelin, seated in the chair. So it's a little bit different. You don't have the force production from pushing through the ground or rotating. You just depend solely on the strength and flexibility of the torso. So it's pretty amazing what they can do from a chair.
Yeah, really. That is super cool. We will put some pictures of this in our show notes. So if any of you people listening are unsure what adaptive seat looks like for the shot put and discus, you'll have an idea of that.
But then there's also the powerlifting. And in your traditional powerlifting meet with able body, you have the bench, the deadlift, and the squat. But the deadlift and the squat's probably out for a majority of the athletes who have a disability they're working with. So the powerlifting is bench press only. And to make that a fair event, the athlete is going to be lying flat on a very long bench so that their feet and their legs are supported, and they're actually going to be strapped to this bench so they can't wiggle around. And so it really does take out the legs of the exercise, and so it's strictly just the bench press only with the upper body. And you'll just, it's incredible what some athletes can do with not using their feet on the ground.
Yeah.
And it's pretty fun to train that as well.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about the process of taking someone who is maybe practicing these sports recreationally and then turning them into an athlete? What has to happen?
Recreational throwing or just sport in general is just great to get to understand, how your body is going to be moving in the sport. If you have to transition into a chair, how you need to move, just your basic skills. I would say the number one thing is you have to have the proper equipment. If you are just kind of goofing off and you're like, well, I'm gonna throw the stone around, or I mean that's okay. But if you want to really get into the event, you should actually get the proper equipment, so you're not going to have something that's overweight, underweight, the wrong size, that sort of thing. So equipment's essential. And then also I would say you got to start looking at a training plan, and to find yourself a good coach or someone with some guidance to help you kind of lay out a plan of some sort. So you can start basic and then you can get really specific. I think too often people try to just dive right in, and it's just kind of overwhelming.
Yeah.
So have just a nice gradual plan is helpful. And that also leads to the third part, is that you need to have some actual competitions. So it's fun to go out and play some, pick a basketball, but it's not that fun just 3-on-3 all the time. You'd like to see what happens when you're actually in a game time atmosphere and environment, and how you react to that kind of stress when you're competing. And so those are 3 points. Just the right equipment, find yourself a good coach to get a good training plan, and then actually compete and see what happens, how your training's paid off.
Yeah. Do you know of any organizations that someone who's looking to go from recreational participation in adaptive sport to more competitive could go to find those competitions?
There's actually quite a few. A lot of times, since most like the team sports, it's difficult to have 12 people who are wheelchair racers, or to fill a team. They'll have camps or they'll have clinics, and that I would encourage anybody to go just check it out. On Team Army, Linda Gomez Pie, she is just she's a sweetheart. She is our seated volleyball coach, and she does a lot of work with all sorts of sports. In her former job, I mean, she still hosts volleyball clinics that anybody can join. They can go and they can help out. They can learn if they want to be a seated thrower, if they want to do any type of adaptive sport. She's fantastic. So yeah, I mean, you might have to travel to get to some of these clinics and camps, but then you're going to start to make those connections and just do your networking to find something that maybe is a little bit closer to your area, or that you're going to join them and actually participate in the team.
Yeah. And as like a recreational therapist, I'm just thinking about all the social aspects of being part of a team versus recreationally, if you're not getting together with the same people every week to practice or compete.
I mean, even if there's access at a local YMCA, that they might have some programs that will be an inclusion. And if it's something like wheelchair basketball, if they have extra wheelchairs for people to able-bodied people to join in, then just allow everybody to play. It's just, it's really, it's tough to organize when people aren't aware that it's something that's going to happen, or that they don't have the right equipment. And that's why adaptive sport is a bit of a challenge, because the equipment can be expensive, and sometimes it's difficult to acquire. And even if maybe one facility can afford 2 wheelchairs, that's really not a lot to, participate in like a serious game of
for sure.
wheelchair rugby. It's tough. You could just work on your skills. That's why I recommend trying to find some clinics where it's a bigger event.
Yeah, definitely. And to be able to have access to all that equipment. All right. So let's say that you are working with someone who is a competitive adaptive athlete. What would be the process of that person to get involved with the Paralympics?
Well, the Paralympics is actually there's a lot of steps, a lot of red tape you got to go through in order to achieve that level. The first part would be just to find a coach that can help you be accountable and, get that training plan set. Next is that you're actually going to need to be either nationally classified or internationally classified in your sport. That's just to make sure that you are competing at the level that you're supposed to, and with similar athletes. And it's pretty incredible how they can really dial it in and make sure that you are competing with the same abilities as people in your field. And so, for example, in track and field, it's this coming year is going to be a challenge. They're not going to do many international classifications, mostly just the national stuff. But just in order to do that, you have to go to certain events that are sanctioned, and that's where the cost comes in. Is that a lot of times you do have to travel and to go to these events and make sure that you have your national classification, your international license to compete. So it's good because everything is legit. That they're going to go through every single detail to make sure that this is completely fair and you are treated fairly as the athlete. And it's kind of a pain in the butt, but it's for a purpose. That nationally classified or being classified is super important, and it's a little different than the Warrior Games or Invictus scale. They try to generalize that just because there's so few athletes in the grand scheme of things. But on that national or international Paralympic level, it's pretty specific. So
and that would make sense too. Just in case people listening don't know this, the Paralympics is like elite level of competition. It's not like the Special Olympics. It's like the Warrior Games. There's probably I wouldn't say like a lower bar to compete, but more open.
Yep. And so, for example, I'm glad you mentioned that, but like Special Olympics, you have someone with a little bit more of a mental disability. So it's with Down syndrome or some other mental disability is geared more towards the Special Olympics. Paralympic is they say para because it's run parallel to the Olympic Games. So the able body, so it's your track, field, your swimming, all those sports, but it's just a little bit different. So some people easily confuse the two, but Paralympic is more similar to Olympic. But you did ask a little bit about like the other things. Sanctioned events are kind of important too, because you can go to just some local meets or local events that you can compete, but you really need to make sure that you're getting to events that can be tracked so that you are recognized by your governing body.
Like having an official time versus I had this PR.
Yep, that's correct.
All right. So how do you motivate new athletes, especially those with disabilities, to keep training? You talked a lot about how an important part of going from recreational participation to competitive is to like find someone to coach you. How do you keep those athletes motivated?
Well, I'm sure you probably have to be that first person to introduce adaptive sport to an adapted person, so I'm sure it's really difficult for them to actually see what is possible. So I like to start with just those little small successes. Well, let's go ahead, let's sit in this chair here, let's shoot a basket. Let's just start simple. That you can still make a basket from sitting in a chair. You can still throw one-armed, you could catch, you can do whatever. Let's just start with the basics. Oh, you thought that was fun. All right, well, next week we're going to do X, Y, and Z. Because I think if you show somebody who's really successful, and you say, look at these guys in the Paralympics, isn't this cool? Yeah, I'm never going to get there. That's what they think. They're just so overwhelmed with that type of possibility that it's just too far. So start with their own successes first, those little small successes, because this is their journey, and it's really important for them to experience that success instead of seeing someone else's. I do see that a lot. Just even with my general population clients, that I mean, we're in a gym where there's some really serious athletes, and then I have 7-year-old people, that like, I'm never going to do that. I'm like, yeah, but you can hold this kettlebell here, and you can do this, that, the other thing. That's still kind of a big deal. And I really like to focus on the individual at that point, because again, like I said, this is their journey, and that's the only way that they're going to really commit to this is when they realize that this is something that's going to help them, that they can really truly enjoy.
That's really great. And I think focusing on the individual is especially important in what you're doing, because you're working with, like you said, people, everyone has a different story. Everyone has a different level of ability. And it's interesting though, because I guess in my mind, I was like, you put a poster on the wall or something of like the Paralympics and be like, this is the goal. But it's good to hear from you that it's actually start with what they can actually see themselves as, because put that picture up on the wall a couple days after they get out of rehab, and it's just going to feel really.
I mean, there might be somebody who just jumps in like, man, I'm gonna do that. They might be just ready to roll and have that mindset, but a lot of times they're still dealing with the trauma of whatever they've gone through, and they're not there yet. So let's start somewhere simple. I want you to enjoy being physical again instead of being sad or defeated. It's really important to have that kind of mental outlook on, why are they here? they need to be successful in whatever they do that day. They need some type of success that day.
Hey everybody. I just wanted to take a quick break to remind you all that all of our research guides as well as our show notes can be found on our website, www.realtalkrecreationtherapy.com. If you're looking for those resources, go check it out. Okay, now back to the podcast episode.
So for recreation therapists or other professionals that are trying to train individuals to compete or trying to find these opportunities, like these places that will, if they're at a high level competing, places where they can get a real trial score, where do we look? Like, is there on the Paralympic website, is there a place to look?
So we can always start with the Team USA. So at USATF, that's for track and field, usatrackandfield.org. It links both the Paralympic side and able-bodied Olympic side. But I mean, it breaks it down all the way to youth sport. So you can always start down at youth sport and figure out where a good spot would be. If there's a local club in your area, you can contact the president of your local club, and they can also direct you. The good old Google search can always help out too, if you want to just find out something in your area. I know in South Carolina, there's actually quite a bit of veteran and adapted sport organizations that put on events all year long. There's adapted surfing, there's adapted golf, there's a number of just different organizations that offer things throughout the year. It's not just, it's around Olympic time. No, they want people to be active all the time and want to have these opportunities all the time, because it's important. So yeah, I hate to see it, but yeah, Google helps out a lot.
You're good. We will go ahead and find some organizations and put the links to them, because like Adriane said, there are so many different organizations across the country that can offer adaptive sports. So lots of resources out there.
Lots of resources. And also, that's also how you find out if there's some organizations that'll help find equipment. Challenge Athletics is a great organization. I think they're out of California, but they provide wheelchair racing or throwing chairs or weight equipment for people in need that just need to apply for it, and there's a grant. So sometimes it just takes a little bit of paperwork, and you can get some really cool stuff to continue your athletic career.
I think it's really awesome for rec therapists to be aware of these types of grants that exist, because we work with lots of different people from lots of backgrounds, and like you said earlier, the adaptive equipment is not cheap. The soldier recovery unit, we had a lot of equipment there, but doing the inventory for it, this is like a few $1,000s just for one adaptive bike or one sport chair. So as a rec therapist, knowing where you can direct your clients to, or just different organizations that they might be able to write a grant to get that equipment, would be life-changing, honestly, for some people who want to compete or even just practice a sport.
Right. So, there's a ton of organizations out there that want to help. and sometimes they're just not tapped into enough. So
yeah. All right. So what advice would you give for anyone who's aspiring to be a coach in the adaptive world? Let's say I'm interested in wheelchair basketball or sit volleyball, but I want to become a coach. How could I go about doing that?
Oh, you got to try it. You have to try it with and I would say, like, for example, for me, when I first got to West Point and was learning from Coach Fitchhorn, I was just blown away. And then I was trying to use the simple cues that I knew from standing throwing, like, Adriane, why don't you sit in the chair? Why don't you try this? I'm like, okay. And I sat in the chair and I tried to throw like I threw, and it was different. It had to be different. I had to try sitting in a chair and throwing from a chair to realize that it's a little different in the sport. You have to make some modifications to make the shot go farther. And so I would say definitely try the sport, because it's a totally different perspective when you're sitting in the chair, when you are in a wheelchair, when you're doing sitting volleyball, that you cannot lift your butt up off the floor, so you're going to have to experience it. Otherwise you're not going to have any credibility as a coach, because the athlete's going to look at you like, no, I'm unable to do that. Oh no, don't say you can't. No, actually I really can't. It's not possible. So to actually try the sport and think of it as, you have to break this down as the athlete now with these new limitations with this adaptation, kind of thing. But also be willing to make mistakes. I know I sure did. I tried so hard to put things in perspective, and then I realized, no, that's not how the athlete's going to see it. Even just stuff in the gym where I've said, well, okay, we're going to try this banded ham curl thing, and the prosthetic's not going to respond to that. Oh wait, that's not going to work. We can just do one leg, so it's just like it takes some time for you to kind of figure it out, but that's when you get to be really creative. And one athlete or a client or a patient might have an idea. Listen to their idea. That's their everyday thought process. They know what their body is capable of doing, and maybe they don't know what it's fully capable of doing. So they might have some ideas that they want to run with. So go with that. Talk to them about it, and maybe say, oh, what happens if we try this, this, and this? Ooh, I don't know. That sounds scary. Well, I'll go with you on this. So, I'm I go nuts all the time at work because I like to try fun stuff, and sometimes it works, sometimes doesn't. And I'm willing to make those mistakes and try to build on that. But that's how you get them to stick with it and want to try more. So definitely try, and then just kind of get out of your comfort zone. It's hard to learn something new, so you try out going to different sports and going to camps as well. And I know that there's some conferences that might be able to shine some light on the technical side of things, but talking to other coaches, and I mean, YouTube's been great too, to have some video representation of what they're trying to do. And so there's outlets out there that can help, but you got to try, and you're gonna fail, but it's okay. Because then you'll probably come up with something brilliant on the other side.
Yeah. I really like what you said about that too, to actually try the sport from the adaptive standpoint, because as an able-bodied individual, you really don't understand what the movements are for that person with a disability. So it's good to be able
the first time I was in a wheelchair and was trying to play basketball, the hoop looked so high. But then I figured out you have to do a little bit different, little flick on the hand and this, that, and the other thing. But then, of course, my cardio was not so great going up and down the court on the old wheelchair. So.
Yeah, there's all of these things like add in new dimensions. Like, now the hoop's farther away, and now I have to use my hands to do.
Yes.
So many different.
And you're also more sensitive to the fact that when you're working with this athlete and they're in the wheelchair all day long, there's so much internal rotation in the shoulders that they have these overuse injuries. So now my mind's thinking, okay, this is what we're going to do after the session. We're going to go do this open book drill. We're going to do this, that, the other thing, because I experienced it. I then started to realize what was needed in the rest of the programming. So it's also really helpful for me to learn from my experience and how I fix things.
Yeah, for sure. And that's I'm sure one of the most helpful things, because as a athlete, you know how it feels able-bodied doing these sports, and so you're very attuned probably to like how it feels differently in these other ones. So you can say, oh, okay, this is particularly a challenge for this one or that one. I have a question. So I know, the pandemic, everything were you coaching virtually during that time? And do coaches, say you're like in the middle of nowhere, I don't know, Montana or something, and there's not like a place near you, but you want to start, are there coaches that will do virtual that they
Yes,
can?
actually during the pandemic, I was fortunate to still be able to work with some of my Warrior Game athletes, my Team Army athletes, and some Invictus athletes too, just remotely. I still have an online app I use for weight training and strength training, that sort of stuff. There's a database of videos too, so I can link the video to the exercise so they can look on their little app. They see what they're going, oh, we got to do 5 sets of 5 bench press. We got to do some ring rows in between, whatever it is. And we communicate that way. It was actually really helpful that I could work with athletes and I could modify anything I wanted to because I did all the programming. So I just plugged in whatever exercise I wanted. And I said, well, you know what? I know you have limitations here. Let's make this little change. This is the type of equipment you have. So we're going to do everything with bands, whatever it was. So that was actually really helpful to work with the training app. But as far as throwing goes, I I filmed some videos and put them on the old YouTube again for the athletes to kind of visually see what I was looking for as the coach and to provide some simple cues that they could use when they were practicing at home. A lot of people didn't have the equipment because it's something that their unit had that they couldn't take out, that they couldn't use, or else they were veterans and they had purchased their own equipment. And so we modify things. Okay, instead of a discus, I have this water bottle. So it's about the same weight, but you got to think about this. It's not the same. We can kind of practice the movements, or there's like a traffic cone, something that they could substitute just to kind of get the motion. We've exchanged some videos every now and then, and I can provide some feedback that way. But remote is challenging, but it can be done. But I really enjoy in person just because you can make that in live in the moment and little adjustments, just a little click here, a little click there. We're gonna turn the shoulder this way, that you really can't do remotely unless you go back and forth via text or email, and that just takes time.
Yeah.
But it can be done, and I still work with some athletes remotely.
How do athletes that are at the place that you're working at now, how do they, sorry, what was the place called?
It's called Athletes Arena.
Athletes Arena. So how did they get referred there, or how do you get most of the new clients that come there?
Actually, most of my clients have been word of mouth, or they just did a Google search. Yeah, we do have, it's a CrossFit gym. It's personal training. It's a speed and agility focused towards more like youth and high school to kids type athlete. But we do actually have a number of professional athletes that come and train with us in the off season. Right now, it's baseball, baseball off season. So we have about 8 major league guys that train in the morning. So they're training alongside my 7-year-old ladies, and it's a really cool mix of people. It's a fun environment because it's a little bit of everything. But most of the time it's just that word of mouth, and we do a little bit of just social media stuff, but not enough to really make a huge impact. And we're kind of a small place. It's a private gym, and so we're pretty good where we're at, I guess.
That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any organizations that you haven't mentioned that you would recommend or want to like give a shout out to for coaching adaptive athletes?
Well, I know that, like I mentioned before, Challenge Athlete Foundation. I've worked with them in the past and helped with grants for other athletes to get equipment, and they've been fantastic. You can always check on I believe the Semper Fi Fund also is very helpful, and I'm not sure. It's not just for the Marines. It's like all military can apply. Yeah. So a lot of what I know is mostly military based, but yeah, I mean there's yeah. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot that you can go through the VA if you're a veteran. There's many resources out there. Those are just the ones right off the top of my head. Actually, I think I'll have to think some more. I'll get some more for you to put in the show notes.
Yeah, if you think of them, we can add them in later. So, is there anything else that you can think about for the topic of coaching adaptive athletes that we haven't touched on yet that you think would be important to mention?
I know a lot of people they shy away from it because it's a challenge, and you're afraid that you're going to hurt them. You're afraid that you don't know enough about the sport. But a lot of times people just watch, like the rec therapist, the coach, they'll just watch and see how the person moves, and they can see how they can improve things. It's not like super technical, but you'd be surprised at how good you are coaching just by watching and providing feedback for the athlete or the patient. And so I say, don't be afraid to try, because it's pretty incredible what, two people can do when they're communicating and provide good feedback, because it's otherwise that, someone might be doing something wrong the whole time because they're just by themselves. And there's like zero feedback other than what the athlete feels, and that's sometimes not always the right thing. So I mean, it's great to just experience it and go ahead and just try your hand at it.
I love how approachable you're making this. Like, it's okay. Like,
right, I know. I was really nervous about trying it too, because I'm like, oh, I don't know. I mean, can you rotate on the prosthetic? Yeah, I can stand on it. I can run on it. I'm like, okay, does it hurt? No, sometimes it gets sore, so I got to learn a lot more about prosthetics and nubs and sores and all sorts of things I had no idea about. So a lot of times, people will offer up information if you ask, and I ask all the time because I'm so intrigued. I want to know, like, the ins and outs, how difficult it is to maintain the hygiene of the prosthetic and the prosthetic leg or the arm, whatever it is. That there's a lot going on in there that they really have to be really mindful about in order to participate in sport or just have a healthy daily life. So it's good to ask questions with permission, of course, because they'll give you the real deal. They'll tell you, yeah, it's really hard some days to walk. And so I hate those days where I have to spend the day in the chair because I walked too much the day before. So that's another part of the adaptive sport, that sometimes their body has done too much, and you'll have to start to realize when it's time for rest day, when to say, okay, well, we're not going to throw today, we're going to do some mobility instead, or get creative and still have them move. You don't have to say, okay, we'll just rest all day, but of course that's me. But be mindful that they might have more adverse reactions to the heats. They might have other things that might make them, less successful because they're not paying attention to the recovery aspect of sport too. So I'm learning that as well, because I was always push until I'm like, oh wait, no, we need a break. We need a break from that one.
Trees. Maybe take a break every once in a while.
I don't know what that is. What's rest? I don't know. But I've also had athletes who are like, go, 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 and they don't know the word rest. So you got to watch out for them too.
Yeah, that's a good mental check.
Well, it sounds like it'd be incredible to learn from you, and the way that you're so willing to work with everyone's individual and to find out what those are, because I think you're right. I think as soon as we start asking questions, we're starting communicating, we can really help each other understand what the needs are and what
it's been really fun learning just the potential of every athlete I worked with, that they might come up to me after the session like, man, I really liked sitting volleyball. It was so much fun to be part of a team again, to be able to use my body in a way that I didn't think I could, or they might be really excited about powerlifting because they're like, oh, well, I can't handle the weights, but that's why you have training partners that can help you load up the weights. And there's always ways to make it work, and it's just a matter of just trying it.
Yeah, we love the self-empowerment.
I'm sure that this is going to be tricky considering all of the amazing coaching experiences you've had, but do you want to share for everyone just a favorite coaching moment, or one of those moments that just made you like, yes, this is why I'm here, this is why I love doing this? Share any moment. I'm sure you have many favorites.
Well, I have many favorites. They're all my favorites, just like all your favorite children, right? But one athlete definitely has made an impact on my life, and her name is Beth King. She's a Team Army athlete, Team Invictus athlete, and now she is on, I don't want to ruin the surprise, but she's on the emerging athletes track for Paralympic. Beth came to Army trials for cycling. Cycling was her thing. She was injured in a helicopter accident and when she was active duty, and was having issues with her feet, nerve damage, TBI, all sorts of horrible stuff that just limited her life. And she had to be retired. Or she was retired. So she got into recumbent cycling, something that she was successful in. Really loved cycling. Cycling was her jam. Loved it, loved it, loved it. And so once you get to the Warrior Games, we really encourage you to try other sports because we don't want you to be really good at one thing. We want you good at lots of things. And so she said, okay, track and field. Oh, well, it's kind of like a racing, like the race chair is, it's a little different than a cycle. So in the race chair, you're actually kind of crouched kneeling position and you are racing with this like a little long nose on this race chair kind of thing. But anywho, so we got her in the race chair. She's like, all right, I think I can do this. I said, all right, I'm going to run around with you a couple times. So we went around the track, and I'm not a runner. I'm not a jogger. I walked quickly. That's about it. So I ran around with her. It had to be at least a mile. And I don't do that. But I did it for Beth because she just was actually starting to get into it. And she liked it. She's like, all right, I can do this. And I said, all right, if you're going to try the race chair, you got to try throwing. I love throwing. You're going to love throwing. She's like, I don't know, coach. I'm not that strong. I've never done it before. I'm like, I don't care. I want you to try it. And so I got her in a throwing chair and all of a sudden, bing, she's like, well, that was pretty fun. Like, yes, I love it. I love that you thought it was pretty fun. And so she got into more shot put, more discus. And now she has discovered the javelin, which isn't part of Warrior Games or Invictus, but she's discovered this on her own at the Paralympic level. And she's an emerging athlete. She is on pace, hopefully for Paris next year. And I'm so proud of her for listening to me and trying the throwing, but just her dedication and just embracing adapted sport. Because she was just so tunnel vision with cycling. She didn't really consider the other sports until we said, it'd probably be a good idea if you try this. It'll make you a more marketable athlete for the team, kind of nudge. But it turns out that it suited her body. It suited her disability, to be honest. Is that the cycling turned out to be not so great for her body, but the throwing, hey, it was really, really good for her. And she's really done a great job just shifting her focus. And now she has this goal in mind that I am confident she will achieve. So I'm really proud of Beth.
I love the whole journey that she goes on from, I don't know. I'm like, okay, now it's my sport. And then
now it's my sport.
Yeah. And also it's like a testament to coaches and how they can see things in their athletes that athletes don't necessarily see in themselves and then be able to kind of like nudge them in the right direction. So that's super cool that you were able to do that for her. We will definitely put her in our show notes so people listening can kind of have an idea of.
She has an incredible story too. She's just one of the most mentally tough people I've ever met in my life. And I'm really proud to know her.
She sounds amazing. And that sounds like a beautiful sum of of everything that you've been talking about and all of the work that you're both putting in.
I want everybody to love throwing and powerlifting and all sports.
But mostly
the things I like. I mean, that's fine. That's why you're the coach of those sports, right? You got to like the sport you're coaching, hopefully.
Yeah. Except basketball. I'm terrible at basketball. I can never make the basket.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing this with us. This has been wonderful to learn about.
I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with me, and I really hope that your listeners and your audience, goes out and tries it. There's so many people out there that will benefit from adapted sport, even if it's something as simple as like pickleball or kickball, or if it's sitting volleyball. It doesn't have to be like a team sport, but just to get out and just try it and see what your body can do. I'm just too many people are just sitting around just not sure because they don't know it even exists. And that's where we need to really get the word out to make sure people know that adaptive sport exists and anybody can do anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Got to teach those people what's possible for them and allow them to have the chance to try it out. All right. Well, Thank you again so much for joining us, Adriane. I just want to remind everybody listening that if you want to learn more about all the things that we've talked about, you can check out our show notes at realtalkrecreationtherapy.com. We'll just have a link to everything that we talked about today. We'll also have a link to contact Adriane if you'd like to ask her more questions about her experiences or learn more about even the athlete's arena or what she does with adaptive sports. Check that out in the show notes. Otherwise, thank you all for listening. We hope you have a great day and join us for our next episode. All right, bye. All right, well, as always, thank you again for joining us for this episode of Real Talk Recreation Therapy. We hope that you found lots of helpful information for your practice as recreational therapists. If you're looking for some of the resources that we mentioned, you can go to our website, www.realtalkrecreationtherapy.com. We hope you'll join us for the next episode. Bye!